Welcome to the ThunderCast, your martial athletics podcast produced by the fans, for the fans, with your hosts, Russ Livingood and KD Hudnall. We're bringing you the thundering word on the thundering herd each and every week, so keep it right here. The ThunderCast is on the loose. Thanks for downloading another episode of the ThunderCast. You can follow us on Twitter at ThunderCast_pod and give us a like on Facebook. And go down to the description of all of the ThunderCast episodes for all of our social media links, including ThunderCast.online, the online home of the ThunderCast, where you can catch up on some really cool articles from a fan perspective, really cool ideas, not your traditional stuff really right now of, you know, a game breakdown or something like that, or a recap. This is really some other cool type stuff. And Russ, just take a second. I know you usually don't talk during the intro, but just a few seconds about what ThunderCast.online is all about before we continue into the episode.
Sure. So as you said, we're not looking for play-by-play on game breakdowns or things like that. It's more about we're for the fans and it's by the fans. So our fans can write for us. We're looking for coverage of specific teams, but not in the sense that I need people taking notes at the game. Just watch the game live or on TV, talk about the experience and how everything's going with the team. If we've got passionate fans that want to do that, they're also going to want to read the articles because other people are going to be doing that for other teams. We have things on there about man caves for Marshall, different top 10 plays. Trace Johnson, one of the writers, he did that for us. I have a couple on there. One that I thought was really cool was what it's like for the family when someone enters the transfer portal. And we did Trent Haller's family as he moved here from ECU a couple of years back now, and what that entire process was like. So it's just things that we're not looking to try to compete with existing websites to try to break news and stuff like that. We're more about just, hey, this is some stuff that's going on. It's pretty cool. I've got one in my pocket right now that I haven't written up and posted, but it'll be up by this coming weekend that I think is going to be pretty cool. And I know Trace has one that he's getting ready, at least one that he's getting ready to drop as well.
Yeah, see, so if you're into that sort of thing and you have these ideas floating around in your head and you're thinking, man, I'd really like to have a article where I talk about, you know, XYZ thing, like the top 10 plays or, you know, something like, and I'll tell you what, you know, you've talked about a family going through the transfer portal process. I think it would be interesting to talk to families that as they went through the recruiting process, you know, just the traditional high school recruiting, especially folks that are from nowhere near Huntington, West Virginia, because that's always intriguing to me how, let's say, a family from Texas gets on the radar at Marshall, and then that relationship builds because you're thinking, man, that's really far away. And there are a lot of schools in between where you may be in your part of the country and Huntington, West Virginia. So that kind of stuff always interests me. But anyway, open a tab on your phone and get it open to ThunderCast.online and, you know, check out what we got brewing over there. As football season continues and the summer continues, there's going to be more and more stuff on there. Yeah. We're going to try to kind of incorporate a little bit of a visitor's guide for those opposing fans so they can get places to eat and local spots and all the good stuff. So you don't have to come in and think, well, I need to go eat at Applebee's because I'm not sure what's good here. But, you know, Russ and will definitely give you the what's what around the Huntington food scene. That's for sure.
I heard Tennessee was looking to see if we had an Applebee's.
So I heard, but so look, this is going to be a big week for us. There's a lot of big news and some just happened within the last 24 hours, really. Yeah. But this was going to be a big week for us anyway, because this is the week we kick off our position group breakdown series for the 2023 football season. And we're going to kick it all off with the coaching staff and get a breakdown on the coaching staff and what's changed and what's going on and all the good stuff moving around all those position groups, or who's leading those individual position groups. But before we get into all that, of course, let's get a sponsor, or let's get a quick word from our sponsors at 304carwreck.com. If you've been hurt in a wreck, visit 304carwreck.com on the web or on Facebook. Matt and Jason are experienced injury lawyers in Huntington who have helped many people, just like you, with claims throughout West Virginia, Ohio, and Kentucky. Car wrecks, truck wrecks, and injury claims aren't just something they do, it's what they do. Find them at 304carwreck.com. Russ, we can't get into position group breakdowns and talking about this coaching staff, which I'm really anxious to start doing, without getting at least 5 things every Herd fan needs to know. So lay them on me.
All right. 5 things every Herd fan needs to know this week, as usual, brought to you by Ignite Link, the Tri State's premier IT management team. Number one, this is one of those late breaking things. Megan Smith Lyon is moving on and will be the head coach at North Carolina for softball next year.
This is so big for her. I don't even want to talk about Herd softball right now. I want to talk about her because she's a great person.
Yep.
And the relationship that we built with that softball program and that coaching staff from when we started has just been great. And of course, she's at the forefront of that. So for her, this has got to be the dream job, right?
Mm-hmm.
She's a UNC alum. She played under legendary coach that just retired. And if there was one job on the radar that worried me to death, it was that one. Because, I mean, let's face it, man, if you're in the coaching ranks and Marshall comes calling and you're thinking, I get to go home and do what I love, I'm doing it, right? So I wish her nothing but the best. I've reached out and thanked her for all that she had done to elevate Herd softball and what she did to embrace us and was so kind and giving to us on this show. So I'm really honestly truly happy for her and Corey,
Yeah.
because that puts her closer to home, back to her, closer to her family, her parents, and she gets to be at her alma mater and do things. Let's face it, Sunbelt's big softball, but ACC softball is a big deal too. And she gets to do it on an even bigger stage and try to take her school to a women's college World Series. And I'm happy for her. I mean, I'm not angry in the slightest. It sucks because she was so great here,
Yeah.
and what she did here, and the levels that Herd softball got back to after Shonda Stanton left, and she built it right back up, and it became something powerful again. So now we're left with, what do we do next? Where do we go from here? And that's a conversation we'll have at a later time. But I know you have some words also about Megan and this news.
If I had my druthers, I would hope that she and Corey would be here forever. That they would retire here. I love the energy, the care that they have for their roster. Speaking to alums and current players about what they think and feel about those two coaches, to have them as mentors in life, as friends, just blows you away, and that's what you want in a program. You want to hear that. We hear that in football. We hear that in basketball. These people that would do anything for their coach, they felt like that they've helped them grow as a human. That's what we got with Megan. And she was very friendly to us when we wanted to cover the team, and they were thankful for getting the coverage, and they were also willing to help us cover the team, and approached us with a couple of different things that we ended up doing. Those interviews, those not just with Megan, but with those players, to allow people to get to know this program that much more. I feel extremely close to this program, and I am also extremely happy for her that she gets to go home to her alma mater, not far from where she grew up. Just everything about that. She's going to look. I have zero problems with admitting that the ACC in North Carolina is a step up. Unless we're talking soccer, and I feel like, men's soccer right now is probably on par with that sort of thing. But in just about every other sport, I don't think anyone would disagree that it's a step up to do that. So for her to be able to do that at the place where she played, for replacing the coach that she played for, and being that much close to her family, I'm ecstatic for her. It doesn't mean that that I like it.
Yeah, most certainly don't like it.
I hate what it means that we have to try to replace that.
Yeah.
And all the different fallout that could potentially happen with that, with current recruits and players and things for both teams, UNC
Sure.
and Marshall. Um, but I'm happy for her, and best of luck moving forward.
Yeah, no doubt. Now, look, the pressure kind of gets put on athletic director Christian Spears now, right? Because this program
Mm-hmm.
has a lot of momentum around it. I mean, you just are fresh off of a Sun Belt Conference championship game appearance where you lose 1-0.
Mm-hmm.
You set a single season program record for wins, an all-time record for attendance, not only at Marshall at the dot, but in the state of West Virginia at a softball game. You break an all-time record. Ottomoan does that with the single season RBI record. There's a lot of momentum here. Fan support is good. So when you look at the job, that you look at this program and the job that is now available, it's got to be attractive to some really top tier candidates, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because Megan said it, she said it, like there's not support at other bigger schools like there is here at Marshall, and that's a
Mm-hmm.
big draw. So when you look at that sort of thing, and you know what, selfishly, Russ, I'd like to think that we play a part in that too, because of the coverage that we provide to the softball team that other teams probably aren't getting across the country. Now, I'm not saying somebody would take the job because we do this podcast. I'm
You're
just
not?
saying it's another one of those things. It's pretty cool because we did do a feature on them, and we love talking to the coaches and getting a breakdown on the teams and stuff like that. So it's a small part of something positive that we offer that other schools might not. And there are some names that are floating around there that people would love to see come back home and just brought in to go through the process and everything. And we're going to let that play out, at least get more than 24 hours old before we start talking about that sort of thing. But you're right. There's going to be a lot of roster movement on both sides of this transaction, right? And we don't know who's going to go and who's going to stay. And there's a lot of speculation out there that, well, all of our best players are just going to go. Well, that's not entirely that easy because a lot of them were transfers in. So you can't just up and go without setting. So there's not going to be a senior, I would think, that's going to transfer out just to sit and never play again. So you got to take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. Now, things are obviously different if you're a graduate student and you've graduated and you can transfer on and play again. But we'll see how the roster movement goes. We'll see how the commitments for the class go. A lot of that's going to have to do with who ultimately gets hired to be the next new head coach. But this is pretty earth-moving news for us. I didn't expect to be talking about this, but once again, what can you do, man? I'm just so happy for Meg. I'm so happy for Corey. I'm like you. I wish they would have stayed here literally forever and retired, but I cannot fault her for literally going to live her dream. Congratulations to head coach Megan Smith-Lyon of the North Carolina Tar Heels.
Yeah, I would. I really don't have anything more to say. I would just have to agree with everything you said there. We're going to have to wait and see what the players do. I could see some situations that it would make sense, for some players, but I know nothing about UNC's roster, and I'm not going to speculate on anything. I don't think that's fair for me to mention any kind of names to have people react in a certain way because I know nothing about what these players are going to do, and that's between them and their coaches and all that. So
let's also not forget we've got something pretty good here. We've got something pretty good going here. So
sure.
The grass isn't always greener, and sometimes you find out that looks that way, but it's not. So we just have to wait and see. We're in a wait and see mode right now. That's it.
Yep. All right, number 2, a little bit more positive news here. We got Chris Parker is also on the College Football Hall of Fame ballot, joining Randy Moss from Marshall. He's been on there before, but great to see that he has a renewed chance on getting in.
Yep. For all the talk that there has been recently, not only about Moss being on the ballot, but amongst some of I'm going to assume that they're younger members of the Herd fan base talking about, it's usually in conjunction with talking about the return of Rasheen Ali. They're talking about the great running backs in Herd history. And some of these lists just absolutely forget to mention Chris Parker, and he's the number one rusher in school history. The
I
number
never
one.
I never forget. And anytime when we were in school, people, maybe they didn't follow until they got there to school. Maybe they started picking it up. We were here the first year of uh, going back to Division 1A is what it was at the time. But I used to tell people, if you have not seen Chris Parker run, you need to get some videos and watch this guy run.
No kidding, because he's the best ever, right? At least from a yardage standpoint. And he is a great runner in his own. You can't short sell what the guy was able to do. You're talking about a national champion, an All-American. I mean, listen, 5,924 career rushing yards,
Yeah.
folks. So as great as the Ahmad Bradshaws were, and he was, as great as Doug Chapman was, and he is, as great as all of these guys, nobody's close to that rushing total. No one. And to know that it wasn't just a one-man army. It's not like, well, they had Chris Parker and nobody else. No, these are all-time great teams that were winning championships, going to the national championship game, all that sort of stuff. So you're right. It's really great that he's back on the College Football Hall of Fame ballot. And boy, wouldn't that be awesome to be able to get two in the class of 2024. Man, congratulations to Chris Parker. You were fortunate enough to talk to him last year. I think it was last spring, maybe.
No, it was in October.
Oh, okay, in October. Oh, that's right. It was right before the weekend of one of the games.
Mm-hmm.
So you can tell that these guys never have lost their love for the herd, and they love coming back. As a matter of fact, they just had that networking event the other day for the herd football guys, and I saw some of those older guys. I hate to call them older guys because they're barely older than we are, but back taking part in that and working on the professional side of this football brotherhood that they have there at Marshall. So these guys just love coming back and being able to give back in any way that they can to this younger generation. But guys, don't short sell the greatness of Chris Parker.
Let me sell it a little bit more. You know how we would be ecstatic right now if someone ran for 1,700 yards in a season. His final 3 years at Marshall, 1,700 yards in each of those. 1,833 yards as a senior, 68 rushing and 71 total career touchdowns, 428 points scored, 7,145 all-purpose yards. Those are all records here at Marshall. Don't care how many games that they got to play because it was what the Division 1A at the time should have been doing after all was, having a playoff. Don't care that it was Division 1AA. Listen to the coach. Go find those. It's on the ThunderCast YouTube. Go find that interview with Chris Parker, the interview with Glenn Pedro. He was talking about Chris Parker. Listen to defensive coordinator Mickey Matthews talk about Chris Parker and how the field conditions over there caused him to slip. Otherwise, he was going to run for about 600 yards against was it Montana?
Maybe. What you talking about, a championship game?
Yeah. The one that we lost, wasn't it?
95?
Wasn't that Montana?
Yeah, that was 95. Montana in 95.
Yeah. So and he tore up his knee, and otherwise what probably would have been a very good NFL career. This guy was legit.
Yep. If he were coming into college now, he could play now. For folks that for whatever reason think, well, they weren't that great 30 years ago. This guy could play if he was a fresh or coming up as a senior now, and entering the recruiting process. He could play now.
You go stand next to him. Stand next to him. I think he could suit up right now for this year, and just unbelievable. Other thing that I have to say about the College Football Hall of Fame nomination for this year is, we were talking about it's got to be at least 10 years, and Moss played last at 97 here and all that. If you look at the names that are on this list, and a lot of them are from big schools, they didn't play that much later than Randy Moss, and they are just now getting on the ballot this year. So this isn't isolated to somebody at Marshall didn't get it done. We covered all that last week and talked about how they had attempted to nominate him on 3 separate occasions before this. But Larry Fitzgerald is on there. Some people I think that were older than Moss that are getting on there for the first time, and we're talking about had pretty big NFL careers, but definitely college careers.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not as egregious as it looked, I guess you would say.
Yeah, I guess once you dig into it, it's just not a cut and dry thing.
Right.
There's always extenuating circumstances, and you never know. But I don't care. We got 2 on the ballot this year, and if we could, I want at least one. But if we can get both of them, that would make for one epic weekend for a football game in 2024. You can believe it.
Both are extremely deserving of this,
Oh yeah.
and I would be shocked that I know Moss is in. I mean, there's nobody that's going to not vote for him, but I really hope that Chris gets in as well. All right, so number 3, also a positive thing. We got a new basketball coach, but we're also keeping Jenna Burdett, and she's being elevated to associate head coach for women's basketball.
Yeah, I like to see a little bit of continuity there.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen some turnover with some of the assistants already, and I don't know. There may have been more that just didn't make it to the social media, or that it did make it to the social media and I didn't see it. But I'm really happy for Jenna. She seems to be really happy about it too.
Mm-hmm.
And even Kim, I saw the tweet from Kim Stevens saying that there's really nobody she'd rather go to work with every day. So
Mm-hmm.
you got to like what's going on here with Herd women's basketball. Kind of heard through the grapevine a little bit that, well, maybe it was you that said that there's still the potential for a couple more scholarships out there available, and we'll see how those go. But I love a little bit of continuity. That really helps. No matter how big or how small, a little continuity within a program is always a good thing. And it really helps tie everything together, especially when you're talking about a first-year head coach. But I don't think she's having any problems building relationships with this roster.
Right.
I think
Right.
they're pretty ecstatic to have a head coach like Kim Stevens here. But I'm really happy for Jenna Burdett and Herd women's basketball.
Yeah, and we will be discussing Herd women's basketball just a little bit more in Around the Herd. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Number 4, the ECU game has been given a kickoff time of 4 p.m., and that game on September the 9th will be on ESPNU.
Yep, I like that. Love that you don't necessarily have to watch it on ESPN Plus, even though that's super handy for me.
Mm-hmm.
But that should get you a little bit more exposure, and you'd like to think that that's one of those. It's always going to be a storyline. It's always going to be a storyline whenever Marshall and East Carolina play each other. They're always going to talk about the 1970 game. And they're going to show the memorials at both schools because this is what we just believe is one of those unique type rivalries that's just different. It's just different because it's not built out of what a traditional rivalry is built out of. So I'm really glad obviously that they're on the schedule. And I'm really thrilled that this is going to be a nice afternoon kickoff on available on the ESPN family of networks, not just the online family. But I like that. So we're gearing up to have some really big time exposure here, and if Marshall makes some noise in the early season, we could see that exposure kind of shoot up a little bit towards the middle end of the season. But this is a good one. I like that we've landed on ESPNU here.
I have always gotten along with ECU fans. I try to go out of my way when they come by, walking past tailgates for various different tailgate locations I've had over the years. I have always made it a point to stop and talk to them, thank them for coming to Huntington. You and I can remember years back, I'm going to blank on the year, maybe it was 2016, but maybe it was even earlier, 2010, something like that. We played them at home and we beat them when they were much better team than we were. We had a very down year, and we were walking back, and they just happened to be in a huge pack of ECU fans as you and I were walking down 3rd Avenue, and none of them were saying anything bad. They were thankful for the hospitality that we showed them. We talked to them the whole way down. I don't know if you remember that. I do.
I do.
And I love that we're forever going to be intertwined and they have good, passionate fans. I've always rooted for their team when we are not playing them. I just feel like it's one of those programs that you like to see. They're probably not getting the. I know they're not getting the same funding that the bigger schools in their state are getting. So I root for things like that.
Yeah, that's one of those programs that I feel like is really a mirror type program for for what Marshall is. Um, there's a lot of similarities.
Mm-hmm.
We both fight that uphill battle of being not the marquee program in the state in your prospective home or your respective home state a lot of times in a lot of people's eyes. Of course for you and I it doesn't, the herd's always going to be number one, and for a lot of people the herd's always number one, but there's a lot there, there's a lot of similarities there, and East Carolina is just fun to play.
Mm-hmm.
They're just fun to play. When you think about enjoyable weekends, and we've had discussions here even today about teams that some people want to play and others really don't care to play again. And a big part of the reasons that I don't care to play some of those teams again is because the weekend isn't fun. It's just it's not fun. It's not enjoyable. And East Carolina is always an enjoyable weekend when they come to Huntington. Or I've never been to watch a game there, but I imagine it's just the same. A lot of the same types of hospitality. And I want to talk about the house cleaning note here. That was in 2013, by the way, you're talking
Okay.
about. We beat them 59-28, and a lot of folks consider that to be one of Doc Holliday's one or two, even easily top three victories of his tenure, because they were heavy favorites in the Conference USA East Division, and we just took it to them right there at the Joan. I remember one of the key plays where there was linebacker Gary Thompson had a interception return for touchdown that was like on the 3-yard line.
Yeah, I can remember that. Mean? Yeah, so it was on the McDonald's end. Yeah.
So that was just an all around beat down that the herd put on the Pirates, and we're not throwing shade here, but that's the game you were talking about, and you're right. So to come in as a heavy favorite like that, it was quarterback Shane Carden for the Pirates. They were tearing it up, and to get almost 60 put on you when you were the heavy favorite and have to make that walk back to the car, those conversations could have went off the rails really quickly, and they didn't. They were just like, man, you guys were really the better team today.
They were not dogging their own team. They were
Nope.
congratulating our team. That's the way it should be.
Yep, it really should be. So I definitely remember that day, not only for the game, but also the conversations on the sidewalk walking back afterwards. So
I too have never been to Greenville to watch a game. I want to go down there this year. I had it earmarked, and now there is a potential roadblock with a schedule that my wife has and I have, and I don't know. I'm really hoping to get down there. I really want to go down there. I want to experience going to ECU. I want to see that memorial plaque and everything. But I really hope to go, but I would say 50-50 or maybe even less now that I'm going to get to go.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the final thing. And we have some awesome classroom stats for our herd athletes. And KD, before I get into this, I'm going to let you go ahead and tell me what this is. It's a word that you like to use.
Well, I tweeted it. I tweeted it when I saw the graphic. But yes, this is absolutely a differentiator. This is the things that matter more so than wins and losses, and it's how our athletes are in the classroom.
So here's the 2023 academic accomplishments. 14 out of 16 teams have a GPA 3.0 or above. Spring semester GPA 3.222. 80 students with a 4.0 GPA.
Jeez.
Highest women's team GPA went to golf 3.972.
Who got the B? Who got the B?
Highest men's team GPA cross country 3.53. Let's see here. There's a couple more. 287 students were above a 3.0. 10 out of 18 teams were above a 3.30 GPA. and 187 students above 3.5 GPA.
Jeez. I mean, we talk about how many hundreds of student athletes there are, and I think the number is over what, 400 or something like that.
Now that they re-added men's track, I think it's right around the 400 mark. That's a good number to say.
So let's just say that. Let's say it's 400. So you've got 400 athletes, 287 of them. So almost 2/3 or 3/4 of them almost were above a 3.0. And then more than half of those were above a 3.5. And then nearly half of those were a 4.0. So roughly 25% of our student athletes are getting a 4.0, roughly. That's pretty good stuff. I couldn't even sniff a 4.0 when I was in college. And we talked about the workloads and everything else that they have to do. And, the schedules they have to keep. Their time management skills are off the charts and able to be able to do this kind of stuff. And, some of these students, they're studying majors that are even far beyond what I was studying from a difficulty level. So you can't help but applaud them, right? I mean, you can't help but applaud them. The hard work, the dedication to their craft on the athletic fields and the classroom is just something to behold. And I'm so proud. Every time we talk about this stuff, it makes me feel good. It makes me feel a little bit bad that I couldn't do that kind of stuff, but it makes me feel really good that there are people out there that we're recruiting that are accomplishing this stuff.
Well, I don't think if you added my GPAs together for 4 years, I would have gotten a 4.0. But I think the biggest miracle out of that is I got 4 years in. They give up on people a little bit earlier than that.
Say it the right way. They quit you.
they quit our friend Brian. Anyway, that brings an end to the 5 things every Herd fan needs to know this week. As always, brought to you by IgniteLink.
Yep, mixed bag of things, man. But even the first thing that makes it a mixed bag is still a mixed bag in and of itself. I'm happy, but I'm not happy for what it means for the Herd. But I'm really happy for Megan and Corey and that staff. So, so let me ask you a question. Do you want to keep with traditional format, or do you just want to go ahead and do the Around the Herd segment and then close out with the coach's breakdown?
Let's go around the Herd because it's super short right now. There, no games are being played, so we just got a little bit of news that we can talk about on a few sports. We'll start off with men's basketball, and we got an official commit. This seemed like it was all but official for the last 2 weeks, but Kevin Voiles officially commits to Marshall men's basketball, transferring in from, I can't remember the school in Maryland.
I had it. I
did too, but I didn't write it down.
If you give me 1 second, I might be able to find it.
Well, I can tell you that over the last couple of years, he's been right around 49% from the floor and shooting around 40% from three. He's a lefty, seems to be a slasher, can help a little bit. If he's not a full-on point guard, he can help alleviate some of that by committee. But having a lefty slasher that can help distribute the ball and shoot 40 from three, that's a good get.
Yep. And if our guys think, if our coaching staff think this is the skill set that's going to make this Marshall offensive machine move from a more traditional point guard standpoint, then okay. From a distant view, you look at, and you've talked about this before, you can't just read into stats and what somebody did elsewhere, but this is not a situation to me where I look at it the same this time, because you're moving up in competition level. And if you're moving back in competition level a little bit, you might think, okay, you don't really have to pay attention to that. But it's concerning, but not like overly concerning, right? Because you're thinking about the point totals that you have to replace from Kinsey and Andy Taylor and Han Logden, and then you look at what has been brought in. Now, it may work flawlessly, and you might not have a too much of a miss in production there, but being that we're stepping up in competition for Voiles, it makes you go, okay, well, let's see what we've got here before you start getting way overly excited or ready to jump off a cliff. Let's just see what we have. But looks now like the roster is actually going to be complete as far as we can tell, at least from a scholarship standpoint. I don't think there's anything else out there. There might be one floating that I don't know about. But this is what we needed, right? They said, well, we've got to have a point guard, we've got to have a guard, we've got to have somebody that can distribute and move the ball and score when needed. And Kevon Voiles is the guy for the Herd.
There's a lot of scuttlebutt online. I think it's a lot of wishful thinking. I don't know anything inside. Otherwise, we would talk about it. But we have a lot of talk that there might be one more position that we're going, or one more player that we're going after. I won't pretend to know how that could come about, and anything would be, again, unfair speculation. Look, we speculate on here all the time, but
Sure.
I'm not going to talk about uh, a particular athlete or athletes that may or may not have a scholarship next year. That's just nothing that I'm going to get into. You can find plenty of discussion on message boards, and I would just caution everyone to say it's an individual under a anonymous name on a message board.
Yeah.
If there was a lot of discussion about it, you'd probably hear it in more traditional media.
Yeah. It just does no one any good, right? Like,
It doesn't.
why would you start throwing names out there like,
Yeah.
well, this guy doesn't need a scholarship because blah
Yeah.
blah blah XYZ. Like,
Yeah.
what's that do?
Right.
What's that do? So let the course play out, and then after it's done playing out, then we'll react however we want to react. Right?
The other thing that I'll say about Voiles is, I've seen talk where he had 13 points per game, and this is what you were alluding to. People have said, well, that's only 13, and we lost this and from Andy, and we lost this from Tavion. I don't think that he played the same minutes, and that's the same thing that I said in reverse about when Andy goes down to play for a different team next year. He's not probably going to average 38 and a half minutes a game down there. So he's going to have less shots. He's going to have less minutes to get those points in. His point production is probably going to go down. If somebody played 22 minutes, and I don't have the stats in front of me to see what Voiles played, but we also brought in that other guard swing man from earlier. It was in April when he came in. He wasn't playing 30 minutes a game. He wasn't playing 15. I think he was only playing 2 minutes a game. Right. So it's hard to score 12 in 2 minutes, and if Voiles was getting 13 and he was playing 30 minutes, if he plays closer to 40, which is traditionally what Danny has been doing with his guards, he could have a 25% uptick in his scoring. He could have that anyway, just being in a better program fit for his game.
Yeah, being surrounded by better athletes that fit this system. You're right. You could see one of this situation kind of being the sum is greater than the parts type deal. Mm-hmm. But you're right. That's why I'm going to pump the brakes a little bit. It's just certain knee jerk reaction things are like, well, Russ has talked about this before, but we're kind of moving in the opposite direction with that. So it just makes you think. But I got the school. It was Maryland Eastern Shore is where Voiles is coming from. He's originally from Cape Charles, Virginia, by the way. But just 20 games in last season. So I don't know if he was dinged up a little bit or whatever that was. But, we play quite a few more than 20 games in a season. But he only got 20 games last year. Just something to also take into consideration when you're eyeing these point totals. You might have got cut short right when you're hitting your stride type deal. So we'll see how it is.
Yeah. As for me, I think anything is how players as a team mesh. And that rotation that you're going to have for starters, subs, when a sub comes in, is the team going to drop off, or will they, sometimes get better because it changes their defense or the way that they're pressing or whatever. So I think this is something that we can't really have a big reaction to until we see them play in some scrimmages in those early games of the season to just see how everybody plays together.
Yeah,
you're going to have, this is now the third transfer we've brought in on the off season, and I think that it's going to be something to watch for. I mean, way too early. I see a lot of people writing the team off just because Andy's gone and Han Logton's gone and Tavion graduated, but 60% of your starters leaving is never good. But we replaced 40% last year. Mm-hmm. and that worked out pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, don't forget Cam Kerfman's still on the roster. You got some
Yeah,
guys that play really well. Jacob Connor plays well. Wyatt
yeah,
Fricks plays well. So these guys are just going to have an opportunity to have a bigger role in this system. And Oben is back again. So
mm-hmm.
let's see how it goes, right? But look, hey, one basketball note that we can talk about that's not necessarily herd related, but I saw yesterday that Louisiana big man Jordan Brown's back in the portal. So,
Yeah,
the portal giveth and the portal taketh away, guys. It's not just the herd. So
yeah.
that guy was in, back out, and now he's in again. So what a tumultuous situation down there in Louisiana for the Cajuns basketball team. But anyway,
All right, moving on, we have some notes here about men's soccer. Takahiro Fujita also signed. We went over that class. I do not believe he was
he was
in
not.
that.
This is a late addition.
So we have 14 now. Was that 13 that we had last week that we went over?
Yeah, it was either 13 going to 14 or 14 going to 15.
Yeah, I think it might be 14 going to 15. But anyway, Grassy just seems to always be bringing people in, and it seems like a melting pot of not just nationalities, but from different levels of play. Like some are coming in as freshman transfers from other colleges. Some are coming in and have been playing overseas. It's just a grab bag, kind of the different levels that he's bringing in. But this looks like a deep, deep team.
Yeah, this is not what I'm thinking is built for a reload for 1 year. It
Right.
looks like they're trying to build some continuity to remain at the top of the Sun Belt Conference and in the NCAA picture for years to come. I think we've kind of put to bed the fact that Chris Grassy likes it at Marshall. He's being paid among the tops in the nation, so there's no reason to just leave and try to build something else here. So Marshall's put itself and positioned itself in a place to where they could be a national power for many years to come. And the roster makeup that we're seeing now, particularly in this class, is really alluding to that, because it's not just, well, let's load up with guys that are only going to be here for a year, maybe two, and then we're going to have to do it all over again. So if you're a herd soccer fan, you've got to feel good about what you're seeing, out of that program. And if you're just a casual fan, like I'm just a casual fan, still trying to learn, but I can obviously look at freshman, junior, senior, sophomore stuff and go, okay, well, this isn't a 1 year deal. I can at least do that. So I like what we're doing. And it's nice to know that we're building towards the future while also remaining extremely competitive in the present.
By the way, these last this team here that we were talking about, but also we talked a little bit about women's basketball in the five things. Both of those are currently, we are trying to find someone to write on those teams, as we talked about at the start of this show. So
yeah,
if you are someone that knows all the ins and outs on soccer and you do watch all these games, why don't you write about it to your fellow herd fans? Give us a DM and we'll see if we can't make that happen.
Yeah.
Final thing that I have for Around the Herd over in football, linebacker Jonathan Perkins came over from a JUCO in L.A., but previously he was a 4-star, I think, at Oklahoma.
Yeah, he's the rich get richer, right? This herd defense just keeps adding weapons, keeps adding pieces. This is the latest is linebacker Jonathan Perkins, like you mentioned, from Fontana, California, comes to the herd from the University of Oklahoma by way of East Los Angeles College. 6'2", 220-pounder. Racked up 63 tackles in just 9 games in 2022. So, hey, 7 tackles a game. I think you'll take that from from a linebacker who doesn't have to be the guy, because we have several the guys here in Huntington that are already performing at a high level. I don't know, really how they'll fit into the rotation. We'll have to get into all that as we get into summer session and what the 2 deep starts to look like and where guys are starting to fall. But more pieces, I'll take it, right? This defense continues to look scarier and scarier. And we're going to talk about a little bit of that as we get into the coaching breakdown, but keep them coming. Keep them coming. I talked to Huff not too long ago for the Thunder Trust on their latest podcast, and I asked him flat out, "Are we done?" And he said, "No, we're never done." So this just goes to show you, like this coaching staff doesn't sleep. If there's an opportunity to grab a player that they can utilize, they're going to go get them. Period. So another piece to the puzzle. If you're a Herd fan, if you're a fan of Herd defense, Jiminy Christmas. It's like Christmas every day.
This
every
defense
week.
is looking scary, and we're talking about a defense that lost several key players, but on paper it's looking like this might be deeper and better than last year, and that's a big say, I guess, to say
Yeah,
that.
because you're talking about a top 10,
Yeah,
in total defense unit from a year ago, and to say, well, they could be deeper. Well, they could be. Who knows?
yeah.
There's some big pieces that have to be replaced and augmented, but there are some big pieces that also return, folks. And we're going to talk about some of them here in a minute. So if that's all you got for Around the Herd,
That's
let's
it.
switch it up a little bit. Let's talk about the first segment in the series, or the first in the series of the 2023 position groups. And we're going to start with the coaching staff like we always do. We had a little bit of shakeup here, not a whole lot, but some. And we're going to talk about, all 11 of them, I think. 2 departures from the staff from a year ago, Russ. 2 new coaches added to the staff this year, and 1 position group change, one change in position groups that really occurred last season, but it's still 1 position group change. So the 2 departures from the staff, of course, defensive coordinator Lance Guidry is gone, headed to Tulane, and then now left Tulane and is at the University of Miami. And offensive line coach Eddie Morrissey, but that happened after the second week of the season last year. So that's super old news, but still on staff last year, not on staff this year. 2 new coaches come over for 2023, a new defensive coordinator in Jason Seymour, and a new tight end coach, Derek Shea. The 1 position group change, of course, was Bill Legg, who was the tight end coach early on in 2022 and then switched to the offensive line once Morrissey departed the staff. So other than that, everybody else is the same. There are some interesting notes that we can talk about, but let's just kind of run down everybody, okay? Give you an opportunity to talk about each one of these guys if you want to as we go. If not, we'll just move on to the next. Of course, you're starting with the head football coach, Charles Huff, entering his 3rd season for the Herd, a 16-10 overall record, which if you think, well, that's really doesn't blow me away. I really hadn't considered that it was a 16-10 record, honestly. 1-1 in bowl games. What I did know, and what I do try to hang my hat on, is that it's +2 wins from year 1 to year 2. So we're definitely trending in the right direction. If we can keep that trend up and go +1 or +2 or more wins in 2023, you're looking at a 10-win minimum Marshall Thundering Herd. 0 conference championship game appearances, though we have famously talked about it, Russ. 1 bad quarter against Coastal Carolina, and Marshall's playing in the SBC championship game. So, quick notes, quick news, whatever you got real fast on Charles Huff as he enters his 3rd season as the head man for the Herd.
You listen to the man talk, people want to run through a wall for him. It's probably why they also think that he's such a great recruiter. He is, but he does not promise that, hey, you come here, we're just going to hand it to you. He wants people that will work. He tells that in everything that you hear him talk about. People are going to come here and work. And he also wants to get a certain type of player. And I have famously talked on here about size, but that's not what I'm talking about here. Character.
Mm-hmm.
You don't hear a whole lot about we had this problem, that problem, so-and-so had to be kicked off the team. I think you'll have a little bit of that everywhere, every year, but he seems to be bringing in people that really, really, really do what they're supposed to be doing. And that article about him from 2 months ago that discussed how the players were even saying, hey, things changed when he came here.
Yeah.
So I see a leader, I see a recruiter, I see a guy that is on the rise. 16-10, that's still a 615 uh, winning percentage, and I think a lot of people would be happy with a 615 winning percentage across the country.
Well, some across the country would be, right? But we know at Marshall we're not, right? And that's
Sure.
not it's not unfair.
Right.
So we expect to win, we expect to play for championships, and sadly the younger generation of fan hasn't experienced it the way that we have, and even those fans that are slightly older than we are experienced it. They were
Mhm.
used to playing in conference championships or in the 1AA playoffs annually, and not just
Mhm.
going and getting bounced, like going to the championship game and either winning or losing.
Mhm.
We were accustomed to going to bowl games annually, and we're not
Mhm.
talking about when your conference has 5 bowl tie-ins. We're talking about the MAC that had 1 bowl tie-in. So if 1999 the Marshalls 12 and whatever, or 11 and 0, and they lose against Western Michigan, if they lose that game, they're a one-loss team that's sitting home because the MAC had 1 tie-in. So you had to win to go. And
Mhm.
sadly, we went through a rough patch there that kind of coincided with the start of the Conference USA era, and we haven't been able to fully get back to that. And now the landscape and the way things have just changed in college football, it's almost impossible for any team to attain that level of success again. But we're still going to strive for it because we still expect it. I still expect every season to go in and compete for a now Sun Belt Conference championship. And if I don't make it there, then I'm disappointed, right? And I
Mhm.
think all herd fans are. But I'm not saying, all right, well, we didn't make it for 4 years. Now it's time to fire the coach. That's not what I'm saying. But the expectation is ever present. And now you can't even say, well, Huff can't win the big one. Hello, he went to South Bend, Indiana and won the second biggest victory, in herd program history, in my opinion, and in a lot of people's opinion. So it's building steps, right? And every year it's been something new. And I'm not making excuses. This is just what it is. Year 1, Coach Huff's in the Conference USA. Right? Year 2, we changed conferences. Now we're in the Sun Belt Conference with a roster that is still kind of sort of built for competing in the Conference USA. In year 2, you lose your RB1 going into week 1, and you're faced with a whole different type of adversity. Luckily, you find the gem that is Kalen LeBourne, and that goes out and becomes the 10th leading rusher in the nation. So you can't totally fault a 16-10 record, right? There are games that slipped away. They did. You
Mhm.
got to go to Bowling Green and beat Bowling Green after you beat Notre Dame. You have to do that. And it didn't happen. So there have been some letdowns. There have been some bad luck. There's a little bit of everything. But constantly comparing every coach that we ever get to Bob Pruitt is not a way to go through life, because the game is not the same anymore. It is not the same. The thing I really like about Coach Huff is that he has been really gracious with us. And when we ask him things, he answers. He doesn't shy away from things. He's like, don't ask me that stuff. He's like, I don't care. You can ask me anything. And he's honest with you,
Mhm.
and I think that really resonates with a lot of fans. Yes, I want to see us get to a Sun Belt Conference championship game. Yes, I want to see us win a Sun Belt Conference championship. Yes, I want to see us continue to go to bowl games and win those. We finally crossed that hurdle last year, right? So now it's up from here. What's the next thing? Next thing is the championship game, then a bowl game. Then you push ever closer to that elusive college football playoff that will be expanding. But for right now, in year 3, I think you got to like where you are a lot. A lot of the things you got to like where you are with Charles Huff. Some things you could always change and want to be better. You think he doesn't want to win every game? I mean, Jiminy Christmas. But I think we're in a good spot right now, and I'm really glad that he's our head coach. And you're right, we run a clean program. Guys are doing things the right way, and we're seeing successes play out on the field. So next, Russ, offensive coordinator / quarterbacks coach Clint Trickett, entering his second season as the Herd OC and quarterbacks coach. This will be the first time, though, in Clint's tenure as OC that he will have an incumbent quarterback that knows his system, right? Last year, it was split duty between Columby and Cam Fancher. This year, like you heard Coach say it, if we had to play tomorrow, Cam's likely our guy, right? Now we can speculate that on forever, but we're just going to assume that Cam's the starter. That's what we're going to do. So this is the first time that he's had a full off season, spring season, and what will be a summer session, provided Cam stays healthy, with a quarterback that he has worked with before, knows his terminology, and he has developed for the Herd. The Herd offense averaged 24.6 points per game last year, 22 and a half with Cam Fancher as the starter. But here's the caveat to that. If you take away that 55-point beatdown of Norfolk State in week one, the Herd only averaged 21 points a game with Henry Columbia as quarterback up until they made the switch. So we did see an uptick in points per game with Fancher as the starter. But look, that number of 22 and a half, that ain't going to cut it, Chief, in the Sun Belt. So we're going to definitely need to see that tick up closer to that 30-point per game plateau if you're going to want to hope to have a legit shot in every game. What do you got for thoughts on Clint Trickett? What do you like about Clint? And, all that kind of stuff.
Wasn't just the not having an incumbent quarterback for me last year. It was losing Rasheen Ali, so your entire game plan goes out the window. Yes, they had Laborin that they put right into that slot, but they, as good as the two of them are, they are still different in a lot of ways. And having Rasheen healthy was also going to mean that they were going to have Rasheen and Laborin playing. Yeah. And I think that was a major part. We talked about it here on, I've talked about it on the show all the time. They planned on having both of them, that when Ali was out, Laborin could go in. When Laborin was running after a series or had a long run, boom, just put Ali back in, switch the two of them out. Put them both in at the same time. I think that was the big game plan, and they did not think that they were going to have anything more than a game manager as a quarterback to allow someone with some experience to come in. So Clint had that. It wasn't just Marshall. It was Clint's offense and his game plan that you had to say, okay, now we're going to have to do something totally different we did not expect. And then with Fancher, Coach Huff said it on here, you got a guy that it was his freshman season. Can you give him, he's on level 3. Can you give him and expose him to 5, 6, 7, and 8? Or do you need to make sure that he's good where he's at 3? So I think that this year we're going to see the offense open up. I think we're going to see, barring injury of any kind of catastrophic things, we're going to see what would have truly been our game plan for last year. And I think that we see a lot more points.
I don't even think you can accurately say, well, what we saw in the Myrtle Beach Bowl was what we had hoped to see, because I don't even think that's accurate. We talked about with Coach, he talked about Fancher having back spasms and could barely get around, and it was painful for him to try to pass and all that kind of stuff. So that's not even what the offense would have looked like with a healthy Ali and a healthy Laborin. And again, you are right. Ali and Laborin are just totally different animals. They both run extremely well, but the added benefit to Rasheen Ali is A, the elusiveness, and B, the receiving ability out of the backfield just changes the game, right?
Yeah.
So that could be more of what we get to see this year. And while we may open it up a little bit more, Marshall's not going to become an air raid offense, folks. No. I don't know if you think that's going to happen. It ain't going to happen, right? This team is built to run the football. They're built on the quick pass and moving the chains and great blocking and stellar defense. And that may not get your blood flowing. You might not see 50-point games, but if you don't get excited about winning, 31-24 and going 10-3 or whatever through 13 games, I don't know what to tell you. I think I would take that. It's all about the wins and the losses, right? And style points matter to a degree, but I don't think they matter this particular year, right? Because this is not a playoff push type year. The expansion of the playoff has not taken place yet. So it's about the next step. And the next step, like I said, when talking about Huff, is conference championship. What can get us to a conference championship and win that conference championship?
And, the better your defense is, you don't have to have that high octane offense. Yeah. I want it. I always want the high octane offense. I want to win 40-10 every game. But if you're winning 29-3, that's still a very good game.
Yeah. Well, that's
So
40-10, basically.
yeah. So I'm uh, I'm really thinking we'll see a higher production level, but definitely closer to 30 mark. I don't think we're going to bounce up to 40. If we do,
No.
I will gladly be wrong.
No, I
But
can't see that. You just have to edge towards 30. That's kind of the number you draw a circle around to go, if we can get to 30, we can win every game. That's just kind of what you think, right? 20, you're not going to win every game. 30, you're like, we can win, especially with a defense like Marshall might field. But anyway, 40, you might see that once or twice, defensive turnovers for touchdowns, special teams turnovers, but that's not going to be 40 offensive points scored game in and game out. That's just not the way we're built. It doesn't seem like. Defensive coordinator, Russ, first year defensive coordinator for the Herd. Jason Seymour, hired from Georgia Tech last year, where he served as linebackers coach. Also served as the defensive coordinator of Division II Valdosta State in 2021, where they made a national championship game appearance, losing to Ferris State, which Ferris State just must have been an absolute freaking machine, because I was looking at some of those point totals and they were just obliterating everyone. He does inherit an absolutely stacked defense that was ranked number 8 in the country in total defense in 2022. Some huge departures are gone. Some huge names return. They really raised some eyebrows with us in the transfer portal and through recruiting. So we'll talk about some of those individual players when we talk about individual position groups and these coaches here in a minute. But thoughts on what we don't really know much about Coach Seymour right now, but thoughts about the new defensive coordinator in town.
I'm just going to echo one thing that Coach Huff said, was that it's going to be different, but it's going to be a good different.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about that. He said that he's going to make pizza, same as Coach Guidry made pizza. It just might taste a little bit different, but he's still in the pizza making business. I like that analogy, and I think that his experience at a championship level is what I really like. Until we get to know more about what his scheme is going to be, actually seeing game in, game out, how often is he going to blitz? Is he going to be in the cover 2? Whatever it's going to be, but I think that we're going to see roughly the same, just based on Coach Huff's comments, roughly the same scheme that we had under Guidry. But really, I mean, jury's out until we can see it.
Yeah. Now, listen, I can famously remember people on social media. I don't think they were tagging our ThunderCast account, because I'm not sure if we had it at that point. We might have, I don't know, but I famously remember people tagging me, not Herd fans, literally laughing because Huff hired Lance Guidry. And they were like, this is going to be hilarious. You guys aren't going to be able to stop anybody. Well, that we saw was egregiously wrong, right? You don't go from a laughable hire to being the number 8 defense in the country and not be flat wrong. So I trust the judgment of one head football coach, Charles Huff, to identify talent for what he wants to do. This is not a situation, it seems to me, where he went out and found just a coach that he liked, and now Marshall's going to turn the whole defense upside down to fit to what this coach does. It looks like he went and found a coach that coaches similarly to what we want to do here, so that he can just adapt his style to what we're already doing and have strengths, like
Sure.
the areas that we are really strong. That is an ace move, right? You don't want to upset the apple cart. This is what we're hanging our hat on right now: the run game and the defense. That's it. So you can't take that vastly productive unit, that whole side of the ball, and just throw it up in the air and go, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
So while we don't know much about him, I feel confident saying that the style that we're going to play is similar to what we have seen. It's just tweaked a little bit with Coach Coach Seymour's signature sauce, right? It's his defense now. This is not Guidry's defense, but there's nobody else on the defensive side of the ball has changed. So the continuity that I talked about earlier with Jenna Burnett and the women's basketball program, the continuity is there, man. It is still there. As long as Ralph Street is taking ownership of the defensive line, Shannon Morrison's taking ownership of the linebackers. You got Chevis Jackson on the back end. The continuity amongst that unit is there. So this man has walked into a tremendously good situation. And now we'll see if we can just trot out one of the most feared defenses again in 2023. Russ, let's talk about their first actual position group, running backs, right? We're going to hang our hat on it. We might as well talk about Telly Lockett. He's entering his third season with the Herd from Huff's inaugural staff. Most of these guys, a lot of these guys are still around from Huff's inaugural staff. Telly also serves as the run game coordinator for the Herd. And let me just tell you if you think this is effective coaching or not. In 2021, Rasheen Ali racks up 1,401 yards, 23 touchdowns, which led the NCAA in touchdowns. Then, oh, by the way, 2022, Kalen LeBourne comes in as a relative unknown to Herd fans and racks up 1,513 yards and 16 touchdowns, which is good for 10th in the NCAA in yards and led the Sun Belt Conference in both categories. Ali returns, Ethan Payne returns, AJ Turner returns, and he showed flashes last year. There are several younger guys that are going to get some opportunities to get in the mix. I don't know. What do you think about Telly Lockett? Looks to me like he just churns out production from his room.
I think, one I've heard from someone that was with him at a previous school talk just glowing about him. And I don't think that it's any coincidence that we have the running back production that we have. I think this is a sleeper for one of the most important aspects of the team. We always talk about how important it is in the off season to have a strength coach and program going, because that's so underrated, because they're the only ones that are going to be with them during the off season. But Coach Telly Lockett, I think from recruiting, from developing the running backs, we have a good one here, and I'm glad we were able to keep him this offseason.
There are a handful of our position group coaches that I set on my hands and hope, geez, don't be the one that gets hired away this year. And Telly Lockett is one of those guys. I cannot believe that he is still in Huntington. That makes me extremely happy. Not only a great coach, but he's a great recruiter and a great guy, right? Yeah. A great guy. Well known in the state of Florida with stops at Florida State and then the high school ranks down there. So those connections are, as we know, so important. To keep him in Huntington for another year is, I don't know what kind of coup we got going on, but I'm glad it's going on because I like Telly Lockett on our sideline. I like him working with our running backs. And I mean, 2 straight 1,400 plus yard rushers, not just 1,000-yard rushers, 1,400 plus yard rushers. And Rasheen Ali back healthy. Boy, oh boy, this could be something special for the Herd again in 2023. Let's go to the defensive side of the ball and talk about a guy we were just talking about. At least I was just talking about Ralph Street, third season with the Herd. 2022, let's talk about a little bit of what this Herd defense did, right? Number 1 in the country in third down defense with a 23.5% conversion rate for opponents. The number 4 ranked rush defense, allowing just 93 yards a game. The number 6 scoring defense and the number 7 in total defense, which I mentioned with Coach Seymour earlier. Ralph Street, man, Herd all-timer, absolute legend. And if there is any question that this guy has, I think he knows all the tricks in the book when it comes to coaching defensive line, because it's been one of those marquee positions. Defensive linemen, defensive tackles, and defensive ends have just been stellar the last 3 years. And they were great before that, right? They were great under J.C. Price, but we saw absolutely no drop off in production from a coaching change from a guy like J.C. Price to Ralph Street. Just further cementing his all-time status at Marshall, Coach Ralph Street. What do you got?
the same that I had for Telly Lockett on offense, I have for Ralph Street on defense. And I think that, again, the level of player that we get to play for Ralph Street is much bigger than what we had. We no longer have, hey, let's take the defensive ends and move them in to be down linemen and bring in outside linebackers and make them defensive ends and bring safeties up to be those. We're not playing that smaller, faster thing. We've still got the speed, but man, we've got some 6'4", 305. We've got some nose tackles in here that we're going to dominate that line of scrimmage.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time, that's what we do on defense. All the praise for Ralph Street and what he does. He's a great guy, great personality, and the level of play that we get out of the defensive line, man, with the sacks, the QB hurries, just pushing around the offensive line, shutting down the run game.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be one of the major issues that we had, and it was because we didn't have the big guys to stop the run, get that penetration up the middle. People seemed like they could push us around, and I'm talking a few years back, but push us around and run and get 3-4 yards whenever they needed it. And that's no longer the case. And this, I think, starts that great defense that we have is right up front.
Yeah, we've talked about guys that from basketball standpoint that you look at their stats and you don't know, well, okay, how's it going to work out here? Well, I think defensive line is one of those areas where we do that here. You're like, well, we brought in Anthony Watts last year from Purdue, and he didn't really have a lot of stats, and he was a great situational rotational player for us. Isaiah Gibson comes over from UK. Same kind of story. Sophomore guy, didn't have very many stats. You saw the weapon that he became for the Herd last year, and he is back again along this Herd defensive line. Let's talk about some of the guys that return, right? Of course, Owen Porter's returning. Anytime you have a guy like Owen Porter, your defensive line is going to be strong. Sam Burton's back. Taquez Leggs is back. I mentioned Isaiah Gibson. He's back. Elijah Alston is back. And then you look for transfers and younger guys that were here last year to take a step forward to bolster the depth along this offensive line. And primarily, I'm looking at some of those guys that we just got, 2 weeks ago. It seemed like we recruited an entire defensive line when we did like a portal update episode. And famously in the green and white game this year, Elijah Russell flashed for a lot of people. And you're talking about a 6'7" sophomore. He's either redshirt freshman or a sophomore. That's the young type guys that are looking to make a leap this year. If there is another position group that mirrors the personality and type of their coach more than Ralph Street and this defensive line, I'd like to know who it is, because they play, give it the words, violent and disruptive, just like Ralph Street used to play for the Herd. He teaches that, he coaches that, he just eats it up, right? And you see this come through in his players and out of his room. Ralph Street's a star. He came to us kind of like we talked about Megan going home. Marshall called. He was a defensive coordinator at Florida A&M, I believe it was, and Marshall called, Coach Huff called and said, hey, you want to come home? And here he is, right? And he's doing big time things for the Herd. Once again, he used to do it on the field. Now he's doing it on the sidelines. Herd fans, I know, you just can't get enough of Ralph Street. He's just a cool dude, man. He's just a cool dude. Let's talk about wide receivers. Wide receivers coach Jovan Bonight in his second season also serves as the passing game coordinator for the Herd. He's done a pretty good job, Russ, of developing the young talent. We saw Charles Montgomery make some big time flashes in 2022. Some of those younger wide receivers, a couple of them hit the portal and are gone this year. The room did take a hit. Corey Gamage is gone. Shadida Med's gone. And of course, EJ Horton, who was a guy we thought was going to make some noise, also gone. Talik Keaton, though, back, healthy. Caleb McMillan, senior now, provides a whole different type of leadership and some production, big playability. We saw some big play from him in the Bowling Green game. And Jaden Harrison returns, which we could see Jaden double dip on the special team side of things. We'll see. We'll talk about that in a minute. But we're looking at young guys and we're looking at some transfers that are going to have to push this room for real depth. We know what Talik Keaton is, we know what Talik Keaton does, and we know how electric he can be. We're really happy with the development of Charles Montgomery and guys like Caleb Coombs, McMillan, and Harrison. But kind of after that, you have to see what you got. So what are your thoughts on Coach Bownight? There are some, I didn't mention the transfers that we got coming over, but you can talk about that if you want.
Well, so this is the one position in football from a position group standpoint, along with the tight ends. But it's hard to be productive if the ball is not thrown to you, and it's hard to be productive if it's not thrown to you in a good way that you can get good yards after catch, or just being open doesn't sometimes cut it. You still have to have it thrown to you. We struggled passing last year a lot, and then we had a switch in how we were doing things, brought in Fancher to be, and things seemed to open up more. We weren't throwing as many balls just at the line of scrimmage or even 3 yards behind the line of scrimmage. So I'm really looking forward to the same way that we're going to open it up a little bit, I believe, with Clint's offense, what this wide receiver room can actually do. I think we had talent there last year. I think we can always upgrade that talent, but I feel like we didn't get to see what Coach Bownight's receivers were capable of doing, and I think that we'll really learn a lot more about him this year.
Yeah, I'm with you. But still, even if you're not getting the opportunities there, from what you're seeing from a developmental standpoint, the route running, the leverages, all those little techniques to get yourself open, we saw that. We saw an improvement in that type of stuff. And if this couples along with the further development of Cam Fancher and what we think will be a little bit more of a downfield passing game at times, you're right. We might see some guys make some big numbers here. But famously, we've got a couple of transfers coming in. One from University of Kentucky and then McNeese State are the two that really get on the radar for most folks. And we'll just have to see what this offense looks like. Let's head over to the defensive side of the ball again. We're going back and forth here. Let's talk about Shannon Morrison, one of the all-timers for the Herd, just like Ralph Street. Third season with the Herd. Also the assistant head coach for Charles Huff. There is absolutely no question that Shannon Morrison gets the absolute most out of his players, right? We've seen Abe Beauplan have tremendously productive years across 2 different conferences under the tutelage of Shannon Morrison. We saw Eli Neal have 2 vastly productive seasons in 2 different conferences under Shannon Morrison. But Abe Beauplan is now gone, right? Eli returns. We've got a couple of other guys that are returning, guys like J.C. Anderson, which Coach talked about a couple of weeks ago. But the production outside of those 2 guys is going to have to heavily rely on some transfers and the further development of some of those high school recruits that were in the program last year. I guess we're famously looking at Ty McBride as one of those transfers, Kashawn Brown, who came over from App State, and Mark Viachich, I think he came from Southeastern University, will be keys to some of that substantial play that we're accustomed to seeing in from Herd defenses from a linebacker standpoint. But there are some young players. Coach mentioned Leon Hart, who we were excited about in the recruiting class last year, and Andrew Morris, one of those workhorse type dudes that has made a stride. We'll see how everything kind of irons out on the 2 deep. But this room is by no means bare. But losing a weapon like Abe Beauplan is just not that usually easily replaced. Luckily, Eli Neal returns. And if you're not a big fan of Eli Neal, you're just not a big fan of good linebacker play. So what do you got for Coach Shannon Morrison?
So last year, I stated that he had been rumored to be up for defensive coordinator in years past or head coach in years past. And you got a lot of fire and ice from the fan base online. It's like, oh, no, not bringing him back. But none of it was about him, the person. It was the time of that part in his career to be at that level, to be a head coach or whatever. I have not heard anybody say anything bad about what Coach Morrison brings, and I've spoken to the man. You've spoken to the man. Great dude. Just a great addition. We had a great linebacker room last year, and I see it. Honestly, I see it going up this year. That's more from when we're doing that position breakdown to say why.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what you get with him is a good level of consistency from year to year, and he's an energetic, one of those good dudes like Ralph Street that is just energetic, and his room like really buys into what he says.
A couple things stick out for me to about Coach Morrison. Number one, he's a straight shooter, and he doesn't really hold anything back. So if you're looking for an honest answer, he's going to give it to you, even if you don't like the answer. So I can respect that, right? Because I don't want to be fed some bullcrap that proves to not be true. He's a fairly intense guy, and I think you kind of have to be that way if you're a linebackers coach, right? Because of the physicality that goes into that position and what you are asked and tasked to do at times. You just kind of have to have a different outlook and a different approach. And I like that. But along with all those personality traits, he has always been somebody that I didn't feel intimidated to talk to. It's just I just had to be prepared for whatever the answer might be, right?
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely love that he is the linebackers coach. I think he fits that to a T, especially fits it to a T here at Marshall, where he starred and played and knows what it means to have to perform at a high level in front of a Joan C. Edwards Stadium crowd, right? So that little aspect to me kind of drives it home that not only is he a great coach and a great developer of talent and a great game planner and a great everything you need in a coach, he just freaking gets it. You know, he gets it, what it means here at Marshall. That just can't be understated enough. He and Ralph, they just get it. And I think that goes a long way as to why we see this defense play the way this defense often does, you know. New coach to the staff this year, Russ, tight ends coach Derek Shea, hired from Missouri, where he was the offensive quality control analyst back in March of 23. He also worked in an off-field staff role at LSU, where he focused primarily on the tight end. So this was not a shot in the dark. You know, he has experience working with tight ends at the SEC level.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what we're going to look like at tight end. We've made so many jokes about how many there are on the roster and how they're going to fit in and what we're going to look like. But what I can tell you is we do know that sure-handed tight end Devin Miller has graduated and has departed. Toby Payne will return along with Ramad Smith and Sean Salas, who we're really excited about, and a plethora of transfers that have entered into the mix. I mean, I kept trying to come up with an adjective, and I hate using the same old ones, but really curious and intrigued is where I am with this room based on the sheer number of tight ends that are on the roster and how they'll be utilized in the Clint Trickett offense this year. So, thoughts on Derek Shea?
Yeah, so he's another one of those guys that we're going to have to kind of see because he's brand new. Kind of see what he brings to the table. Love everything about him so far. The interactions on Twitter and brief face to face. But the the room had 6 returning. I'm looking right now, 6 from last year that's returning, and that's if there's no position changes. And then you've got 3, I think, that we brought in, maybe 2, but we're definitely up to 8 or 9 tight ends on the roster. I just how he manages that, what we get out of these tight ends, again, it's a position that you have to get the ball thrown to you. You can still make an impact in blocking and that sort of thing. But it's going to be very, very interesting to see how we do this because we've got so many different types of tight ends. We've got the big body tight end that's basically an extra offensive tackle. We've got the tall yet very fast matchup nightmare. Uh, we've got the all around guy that can do a little bit of everything, and we've got everything in between. So it's going to be interesting. But right now, I just have to see more out of Derek Shea in a, same with Seymour is what's it going to look like after seeing a few games?
Yeah, and of course, you're probably going to see some of these tight ends on special teams. And I don't think it hurts to have big dudes that can run to play special teams. So 8 on the roster, you don't, if that number stays at 8 or 9 or whatever it is, don't count on seeing 8 tight ends, actually play consistently. I just can't fathom that happening, but I'm with you. In brief interactions with Coach Shea, I get the feeling that he is appreciative and respectful of the opportunity that's in front of him at Marshall. He understands the expectation here for the herd, and these guys aren't amateurs, man. They're pros. Like they're professional coaches. So you don't go into a situation and, like I said before, and just go, well, I'll see how it goes. So, but it's still, you think it takes a little bit of time for people to grasp and understand, like, okay, we say it's special at Marshall. We're biased because we're Marshall alums, but even outsiders that didn't go here come here and go, it is a little bit different there. It is a little bit special there. And I feel like Coach Huff does a great job at bringing in whoever he decides to bring in. They understand that kind of like day one. You know what I mean? So while this is a I don't know, work in progress, let's call it, because we don't know what this whole room's going to look like and how it's going to shake out. I like this young coach here that's really relatable to this room of guys, and is obviously doing a really good job in the recruiting standpoint. Or else, how do you get 8 guys? How do you get that 8th guy to look at you and go, well, you got 7 already? Hell, I'm in. Let's do it. You must be one hell of a recruiter to get that 8th yes. A trio of other coaches we've got to get through, Russ, and then we'll wrap this episode up. Let's go to cornerbacks coach Chevis Jackson. In his 2nd season with the Herd, also serves as the Herd's co-defensive coordinator, a role that he has landed just this season. Comes to Marshall from the University of Kansas a couple of years ago. I think Chevis Jackson's development of the Herd corners over the past couple of seasons, or last season, was really, really apparent, man. I know he got to build off of a really good foundation that was put in place the year previous, but you can't question the play of Stephen Gilmore and Micah Abraham in particularly, not to mention the rest of these young guys. But Gilmore and Abraham finished in the top 50 nationally in interceptions. Both of them had interceptions on Marshall's biggest stage last year against Notre Dame and South Bend. Gilmore graduated, and a few others transferred out, but Micah Abraham returns, who is he's starting to gather some big accolades from a national standpoint. Jadarius Green McKnight returns, as does Daquan Smith, Kerryon Martin, and Jacoby Henderson, a guy that we were really high on in the spring last year. Instant impact transfers J.J. Roberts, who the Coach Huff talked about, and then a couple of big-time SEC guys and not SEC. I guess they're about to be SEC since Texas is going to the SEC. But Josh Moten and Ishmael Ibrahim come over to make this Herd secondary look pretty formidable on paper once again. What do you got about Coach Chevis Jackson?
We're absolutely blessed to have him here. NFL experience, big time college player and program experience. Technique is one of those things as a defensive back, I think, that goes a long, long way. Speed, obviously, height, obviously, jumping ability, natural instincts, reads, all those things are highly important. But if you have the fundamentals down, and if you made it to the NFL, you should know your fundamentals as defensive back. I think that we're absolutely blessed to have him here. Famously, as you used to sit with me in the stands, you would know that I did not care for when routine burns happened to the same player and they would get a nickname, or
Yeah.
something. And we don't have that
Yeah.
anymore. We have consistent play. We have, if someone gets beat, it's an anomaly, or if someone gets beat, it's like Coach Huff said in the Bowling Green game that they were playing out of position to the type of coverage that they would normally be playing, all because of an injury that had happened, somebody
Mhm.
being banged up. Uh, it is not routine that our defensive backs give up big yards or give up big plays, give up big catches. It's the norm for it to be the other way around. Lots of
Yeah.
pass deflections, interceptions, people not even being thrown to on that side of the field because of who's over there. Things that you don't see in the stat books.
Yeah. And
And I think that comes from Coach Jackson.
this is stuff that we didn't really have a whole lot. I mean, how many years did not just you and I sit in the stands, but fans for here we are, 10 yards off the ball again. Now you're
Yeah.
always going to have that in certain calls, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's just the play you're running or the defensive set you're running. But it was all day, every day, years ago, 10 yards off the ball,
And
right?
it wasn't just that, it was not turning around and looking and getting the idiotic pass interference calls and getting burned even with your back to the ball. It was an adventure at times, let's say.
And you're always going to have players that just the coverage is great, but you still make
Mm-hmm.
a play. The
Yeah.
receiver's still going to make a play because we're
Yeah.
playing pretty good receivers too.
Yeah.
But I just don't think you can argue the fact that our secondary play has gone down over the
Right.
past year or two.
Yeah.
And it's going to hurt to lose Stephen Gilmore, right? But Micah Abraham making the choice to come back is going to be really big in the development of some of these younger guys, right? Because he's going to put some of them on the spot because, like you talked about, maybe you don't throw to Micah Abraham a lot now,
Mm-hmm.
and it's going to force some of these younger guys to kind of grow up. So we may see a few growing pains here and there, but I really like some of the guys that are looking to make a leap this year. I think the addition of J.J. Roberts is going to be really, really big in the safety from the safety standpoint, and some of these other guys that we've brought in athletically. When you look up and down this roster, you start to lick your chops a little bit and think of what Coach Jackson is going to be able to do with these guys. How is he going to refine these guys, the skill set they already have that's pretty high? How is he going to be able to refine that and make it even better for the herd? I'm not saying we're going to be better, but I don't think we're going to be worse. You know what I mean? I'm with you. I'm really glad that he's here. Anytime you have a high performing collegiate athlete that goes on and performs for a number of years at the NFL level, you know a thing or two about secondary play.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's close it out. A couple more to talk about. Offensive line coach Bill Legg in seemingly his 478th stint with the herd.
Yeah.
But I joke, of course, this is his third season. He also serves as the associate head coach for Coach Huff. Legg moved over from tight ends to offensive line, as we mentioned before, following the Notre Dame game and the departure of offensive line coach Eddie Morrissey. Russ, you've talked about it a lot. And in the second half of the season, the herd offensive line really seemed to kind of catch a groove.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say that that's directly related to Bill Legg, but I can't say that it's not. Also, we know that a quarterback change had a great deal to do with that, and
Mm-hmm.
the different skills that the two quarterbacks had played a lot into that. Took some of the pressures off of those guys a little bit, and they were just able to find a better groove. Fancher's pocket time seemed to increase, even though the skill set is different amongst those two. It seemed like Henry didn't have as much time to pass as Cam did towards the middle end of the season last year. Logan Osborne returns, Trent Holler returns, Ethan Driscoll returns, Dalton Tucker returns. That's 4 out of 5 on the starting line that return, minus only Cedrice Palant and Kendrick Sartor, I guess. So let's call it 4 out of 6. We've got some youngsters that Coach Huff has talked about that have made some body transformations, and their development has gone up quite a bit. And he's really excited about this youngster JUCO guy, CK Obobi, that came in this cycle. We bring in Florida State transfer offensive lineman Lloyd Willis, who personally for me is one of my top transfers in the 2023, 2022-ish cycle, whatever you want to call it. What do you got about Bill Legg?
I have famously said a lot that has been before this ThunderCast podcast was ever a thing. And last year I ate a whole bunch of those words. It was from the time that he was offensive coordinator here. I felt like it was time to move on. I had tired of the game plan, and I've since learned and figured out that it wasn't all his desire to do so. To call a 3rd and 19 draw play. I think that when you look at the history of where this guy has been and the offenses that have thrived while he has been an offensive line coach, he's been in some very good offenses. This is a position where it's almost all technique. I mean, obviously you have to have size and strength, that helps, but you can have a very good technique and help out quite a bit. But it's also the cohesiveness of how all 5 of the people on the field, not counting tight ends or whoever might be on there in different packages, but usually 5 offensive linemen playing together as a team. I think Coach Legg has forgotten way more than just about anybody will know about offensive line. And I also feel like we are blessed to have him here, and the different roles he's had over the years and the experiences he's had. I think that we're going to see a much improved offensive line this year.
Well, I would certainly hope so. It wasn't bad last year, but it was like a half and half, right? It was a little rougher in the beginning, and then it got better at the end. And to have a lot of those pieces returning and to be augmented with some guys that we think are instant impact players, coupled with guys that were here last year that now have a full year under BA in the weight room and a full year under the tutelage of Bill Legg, getting that development that they need. We're going to see some guys that aren't on our radar right now that we will be talking about, through the first third of the season, about like, wow, this guy's is a really pleasant surprise, right? He's really adding something to that unit. I don't think anybody would argue with you and say that of all of the position groups on a football team, the offensive line has to play the most in unison, because if it goes wrong, it looks horrible. But if it goes right, it kind of flies under that radar because everybody else looks good, right? Your holes open up for your running backs. Your quarterback has all the time in the world to pass and all that kind of stuff. So it really only gets magnified when it looks bad, unless you're particularly looking at the offensive lineman while you're watching plays unfold. One of those unfortunate scenarios that goes along with being an offensive lineman. Incredibly vital to the success or failures of a football team, but almost often always go unnoticed or underappreciated. And of course, we try to put the shine on those guys because it's merited, right?
Yeah.
This unit does look really promising for 2023. And of course, having a guy like Rasheen Ali running behind you is going to help make you look good, because there are things that he does that are going to make a defensive line have to alter their game plan. But still, the 4 guys that I ripped off there that are returning from the top 6-ish from a year ago, talking about Obobi and Lloyd Willis, and then, of course, Jalen Slappy, who Coach has talked about before, is really happy with. I'm interested, right? I'm cautiously optimistic. It's a term I haven't used in a while, but this is where that fits best, I think, is that cautious, optimistic adjective for this unit. Let's close out this 2023 position group coaching staff breakdown with a special teams coordinator, Jonathan Gallante's second season with the Herd, comes over from the University of Alabama a couple of years ago, where he was a special teams analyst. 2022, the Herd managed to block a few kicks and even got themselves a blocked punt. The blocked punt course came in 75 week against Appalachian State, which I'm not sure there's a better week to have that happen. And of course, it got returned for a touchdown as well. Talik Keaton returns along with Jaden Harrison potentially in the mix with that kick returner, punt returner type role. Look for McNeese State transfer Mason Pierce to kind of stake his claim for one of those positions as well. Kick returner, punt returner is always those position groups that you really have no idea where it's going to go right up really until week one. You just see who made the biggest stride up to the last minute. From a specialist standpoint, Reese Verhoff and John McConnell both return for the Herd, but the Herd will have a brand new long snapper in 2023. Either redshirt freshman Matthew Bossett or Bowling Green transfer Dominic Konopka will be the new long snapper for the Herd. What about Coach Gallant?
I felt like last year was some mixed results, and I'm hoping to see a big improvement on this. We had some great play at times, limiting returns, big yardage plays. I felt like we did great, but then we had some penalties on special teams. We had some great punts at sometimes, and then we would have, hey, what happened to the kicking game? So it was one of those mixed bag type deals that I feel like we're going to have to see better out of this year. But one of those little things that will add up, even on field position, from punting and punt return, that is going to really help our record this year. Something that'll be under the radar, but when you look back at it, you can say we won that game largely because our special teams played, at an A- level instead of a B- level,
Well, if your MO is going to be run the ball and play great defense, then field position is unbelievably important, right?
Yeah.
If you can keep your opponent to a long field and you're hanging your hat on defense, well, that means you can give up a play here and there, and it really doesn't hurt that much. But we did see a little bit of a downturn in special teams production from a couple of years ago when special teams coordinator was Jeremy Springer. He really had those guys rolling, man. I mean, right out of the gate against Navy, we had the blocked punt, and Rasheen Ali took one to the house against App State, and but you can't just credit. It's not like I feel confident in saying I could have been the special teams coordinator, and Rasheen Ali could still run a kickoff back. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I can't credit the coach for that, but there are little things that are behind the scenes that we don't know about, that we are going to need to see kind of tick up a little bit. And the field position, I think, for me is at the forefront of that. That kicking triad of long snapper, holder, kicker, or long snapper, holder, punter is always one of those things I like to keep my eye on. And it's very much like offensive line. If it goes good, you don't notice it. But if it goes bad, it just looks really bad. So anytime you're going to be breaking in a new long snapper, which Marshall has had a tremendous history of great long snappers, you perk up and you go, okay, well, let's see if that tradition continues or if this is an area of concern. So Gallant has been really great in the recruiting trail. I see a lot all the time. The guys that get offers, they aren't specialists that are tagging. They are tagging him in those like offer tweets or things like that. So there's things that he's bringing to the table that are not just from a kicking, punting, kickoff specialist, return game type thing that are paying dividends for the Herd, but we're talking about special teams here. So we have to talk about the things that matter in a game, and field position is one of those things. Not putting or capitalizing on your opportunities to put points on the board. We lost close games, and a field goal here and there made the difference in a game or two last year.
Yeah.
So, those are things that we have to be able to overcome. While that vastly falls on the shoulders of the player, well, that stuff goes uphill. You're not going to fire a player. You're going to fire a coach. So I think that we'll see improvement there, especially with some of those transfer weapons we talked about. Mason Pierce coming in, who was a first team All Southland Conference special teams player. And Talik Keaton back, man, I don't think you can understate that. Talik Keaton back healthy. If he's going to lend his talents to the return game again for this final go round for the Herd, then great. I'm all for it. But if he chooses that he wants to just be a wide receiver only, I understand that too. But I really like the opportunity to have our most electric players get the ball in their hands the most that they possibly can, and Talik's one of those guys. So intrigued, again, is the word I'm going to have to use for the special teams. But I do like the job that Coach Glenn has done. Since he's been at Marshall, we're just going to need to see some more of those impact plays come across on the special teams. Any final words, Mr. Living Good, before we close this one out?
We did not talk because it's not a position coach, but again, undersung to have Coach B.A. It's not a position, but he is the results that you see weeks 1 through 12 or 13, whatever, is usually starts in the off season with the conditioning program. And he has done a great job transforming some of these bodies, like we have talked about with Coach Huff, people losing necessary weight or putting on necessary weight as needed, even keeping the weight the same way, but transitioning from a body fat percentage to where they have more muscle and speed. So kudos to Coach B.A. as well.
Yeah, I didn't want to leave him out. I'm glad you brought that up. B.A. has been a welcome addition to the Herd staff for a number of years now, and you'll hear coaches a lot of times say games are won and lost in the weight room, right? Mm-hmm. And they are a lot of times. There were times in seasons past where our approach to strength and conditioning was, let's see how many weight room records we can break, and they did that, but it didn't translate to success on the football field. And then there have been other times to where our philosophy has been totally different, and we've had mixed results. Well, in year 3 here with Coach Huff, I think this is kind of where the rubber meets the road the most, because you've had BA for a number of years. You've got the guys in-house that you want in-house. You've got the system and the roster built the way you want the roster built. And now we really just need to see if it all comes together the way that this process is supposed to come together. We've been asked to trust the process for a number of years now, right? And for 2 years, I think that we and the remainder of the Herd fan base has done that without too much chirping and being too vocal in a negative way. But year 3 is where you really want to see the fruits of all that labor, right? And that's not unfair to say. I think everybody knows that, and I think most folks are feeling that. A lot of folks want to see it in 2 years, and that's usually just not the game we're in. Year 3 is the payoff. We have to see that championship come to Huntington, or at least play for one, for folks to continue, I want to say continue being okay with trusting the process, But that's your 2023 coaching staff breakdown. Next week, we'll come back and we'll start with the special teams unit, breaking down that whole roster breakdown and who transferred out and who transferred in and who graduated and all that good stuff. So, Russ, if you got nothing else, take us out here.
Yeah, I got one little small thing, and this is not about Marshall, but a little bit personal. And this guy is, for all intents and purposes, my brother. But yesterday I got to see Chief Warrant Officer 4, Todd Dillon, fly his final flight for the Army. Todd is a frequent listener of this show, and he flew in to Huntington Tri-State and went down to Frost Top with me and his dad and a few other people, and got a root beer and a couple of hot dogs. And then we got to see him fly back over to Fort Knox, and that was his final flight with the Army after years and years and years. So it was extremely cool. And I have 2 things to say to Todd, who will probably be listening to this. And the first is, what if I talk like this when you put it on 1.25 speed to listen to me? And the second is, ain't it bulls? And I know that KD will love that. But Todd, if anybody deserves an ain't it bulls, it's you on your final flight in the Army. Congratulations. And enjoy not retirement, but flying for Delta now. But that's it.
All right. Take us out, man.
All right. Whether you see us at the Joan, whether you see us at the Cam, whether you see us at volleyball camp, or whether you see us at Huntington Tri-State Airport, giving a big ain't it bulls as Todd Dillon flies away, wherever you see us, we're going to be saying, go Herd.
Go Herd. It's the ThunderCast. We'll see you next week with the special teams unit breakdown. Later.